It's 1:30. I'd like to call the August 21st, 2017 meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Commission to order. Roll call, Commissioner Clare.
Here.
Commissioner Littlefield, not available. Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Hale.
Here.
Commissioner Schuline.
Here.
Commissioner Miller, not available. Commissioner George, not available. And our at-large is vacant. So we do have an actual quorum, so we can proceed on. Can I have a motion concerning the minutes of the July 17, 2017 meeting?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Commissioner Hale to approve. We have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Schuline. Hold on one second. Okay. Yeah, staff has a minor comment about the meeting minutes.
Okay, on the minutes before you, there is, on page 5 of the minutes, there were a couple Scribner's errors that were contained within item H. One of those items is being presented as a consent item for you today. The other one is a correction, and that is noted at the bottom, at the end of that minute section. There were a couple just inaccurate directions to the side of the street where parking restrictions, where we were making our reference to parking restriction. Since one of them is done by a resolution, the Commission can just go ahead and approve amended minutes to indicate that they recognize that there was an error contained within the staff report. The other one is, like I said, is being presented as a consent item for today, and that will correct it so that it can go on to the City Council as a correct item for their ordinances.
Okay. And do we have to make in the motion to approve the minutes, mention item H and in the comments?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go back here to Commissioner Hale for your motion.
Motion to approve the minutes with the corrections recommended by staff.
On item H.
On item
Okay.
H.
And our second? Okay. Anything else to discuss on the meeting minutes? Okay, we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the July 17th meeting with the comments by staff in item H from Commissioner Hale, seconded by Commissioner Schuline. Can I have your votes, please? Okay, item is approved. We go to the, here we go, the report on licensed taxi and wrecker services. This will be presented in October, but we do have some comments from the staff.
Well, this quarter report's from April to June.
Correct, because you were not available last month,
Did we not have a meeting last month, or did I miss it?
the July meeting.
I must have been out of pocket then.
Right, so this is actually the information on April, May, June. Mm-hmm. Correct. Okay, thank you.
Well, sorry I missed that meeting. This is the second quarter report. We were quite busy because we had annual inspections in June. Did that the last 3 weeks. So as for driver's permits, numbers are a little low. Inspections are way high. So taxis, we had 17 new drivers, 34 renewed. 1 exempt, which is usually they lose it, or no, they don't lose it, they get an extra one because they forgot to get it on an umbrella company. Had 199 taxis pass. Limousines, 3 new, 11 renewed, 1 exempt, 29 passed. Carriages, we had 3 new, 2 new drivers, 20 vehicles passed. Pedicabs, 3 new, 2 renewed, passed 32 pedicabs and failed 1. Had 1 investigation, 1 citation written on a pedicab company. On shuttles, had 1 new, 31 renewed, and then 87 shuttles passed, and 1 failed, and then 1 investigation on that. Any questions?
Okay, anything about the last quarter? Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Just on the annual inspections, we had every company show up this year, and plus we added a bunch of medical transports, but we only had 3 companies that did not show up. So we've almost got the whole industry coming out there in one-stop shop, and we're done. Just if I can get these other 3 companies on board, next year will be great.
Outstanding. Great work. Thank you. Okay, anything else about that? Okay, we go on now to item 4 with the consent docket. Do we have a motion concerning the consent docket?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve the consent docket from Commissioner Hale. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner White. Do we have any discussion on the consent docket? Do we have anybody here to speak on an item against the consent docket? Okay, so nobody needs to speak. We have a motion. Anything on staff? on the consent
No,
docket?
no other comments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent docket from Commissioner Hale, seconded by Commissioner White. Can I have your votes, please? Okay, item is approved. We go on now to item 5A. Sam Grisham, AIA NCARB, Sam Grisham Architect, PC, to consider request to, 1, establish 90-degree angle parking within a proposed on-street inset parking area on the south side of Northwest 27th Street from approximately 55 feet west to 143 feet west of the west curb line of North Clausen Boulevard, and 2, establish a reserved parking for the physically disabled within the proposed on-street inset parking area on the south side of Northwest 27th Street from approximately 64 feet west to 80 feet west of the west curb line of North Clausen Boulevard. Do you have anybody? Hello, sir. Sir, if I could have your name, address, you have up to 5 minutes, and please fill out a form when you're done. The form's right up there. Yep, thank you very much.
My name is Sam Gresham, 400 Northwest 23rd Street. I'm the architect on the project. Our request is to provide parking for this development, a site that has very little parking on-site. We're not required to have parking. Actually, a parking ratio is not required in this district. Our primary motive was we have 0 handicap parking spaces in front of this building, and accessibility is a requirement for us to, well, it's not a requirement. I don't know whether with nothing to offer in terms of an accessible parking space, we are asking for your help in providing that, both convenience parking as well as a handicap parking space in front of our building. So,
All right, thank you very much. You can go ahead and start filling that out. Appreciate it. Anybody else wanting to speak on item 5A? Okay, can we have staff input, please, sir?
Okay, you've got our comments before you. Going to the summary of staff recommendations. So action on this item is going to be at the Commission's discretion. If a motion is made to approve the item, staff's recommending that dedication of public right-of-way or roadway easement sufficient to fully cover the proposed parking setback area and sidewalks be included as a motion for approval. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on this application.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion concerning 5A?
Mr. Chairman, I move the application be approved with the staff's recommendation.
We have a motion to approve item 5A to include staff recommendation from Commissioner Schuline. Do we have a second?
One second.
Second by Commissioner White. Any discussion on 5A? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Sir, are you fine with the staff recommendation?
Yes.
On the,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Very good. All right, so we have a motion to approve item 5A with staff recommendation from Commissioner Schuline, seconded by Commissioner White. Votes, please. Okay, item is approved.
thank
sir.
you very much.
We go on now to item 5B, Kevin Irvin, City Trailer and Paint Works, to consider requests for the installation of truck crossing warning signs with the flashing signals on West Reno Avenue in the vicinity of 10220 West Reno Avenue. Anybody here to speak on item 5B? Okay, can we have staff input on 5B?
Okay, we've got our comments before you. When we reviewed this particular case, the one thing that struck us was that in this portion of the city along West Reno Avenue, the street passes primarily through industrial and commercial, like heavy trucking interests. At this point in time, considering there's no indication there's a particular safety hazard or collision hazard on the roadway. It's relatively flat. There's great sight distance looking in both directions from the driveway. There's no, like I said, there's no collision trends in this area. We just didn't have cause to recommend the use of a truck warning flasher in the vicinity of this particular location, which is why since we didn't have cause to recommend it, if the commission were to approve it, then we'd be recommending that it be approved subject to the applicant bearing the burden for the cost of the installation. So I'll answer any other questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion concerning item 5B?
Motion to deny, but I would ask that based on the 85th percentile that we ask Oklahoma City Police Department to kind of keep an eye on this section of road.
Okay, we have a motion to disapprove item 5B from Commissioner Hale. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Commissioner Schuline. Okay, do we have any talk on this item? Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if since the applicant isn't present, if we want to consider postponing.
Has the applicant contacted you? Said they weren't
No,
available to be here?
not since we made contact with everyone, because
Right.
at the time that we send out our announcement of the meeting coming up, the applicants get the exact same message at the exact same time, and I had no response.
Okay. So, yeah,
it's
they
up to
have.
you.
So the accidents that he references don't show to be, you said you didn't notice any accidents in the area, is that right?
We pulled the collision history, and the ones that the applicant referenced don't appear in any of the databases we've got access to yet. It could be that they just haven't been, data hasn't been put in yet. The only one that we did find that was in the area that occurred, it wasn't a function of the driveway, and I think the applicant's primary concern is being able to basically, I think for the most part, get out from their driveway onto Reno Avenue. And I think they just had an expression, expressed a concern for safety, and we're just presenting what it is that they've asked for.
Just a question, what would be the harm in approving it subject to them paying for the entire installation, as Stuart said, if we did approve it? Just a question.
I don't have any heartburn off that, other than putting up signage that's really not needed or will be effective. And I also don't want to set a standard for, hey, we'll do whatever you want as long as you're willing to pay for it.
Well, the key is, it's in an area that you do expect truck traffic, 1,000-foot visibility. It is a long stretch, and is it a marked entry point to the road that where if you're driving, you would think, oh, okay, here comes a big truck going to come out. They all come out slow. We all know trucks when they come out are slow and take up two, 3 lanes. Does that area need to warn drivers to expect that? Or is it expected when you drive on that part of the road? I think that's just a personal feel. I mean, just as you look at the road, and I've driven that road, and I've driven it at night where there's not a lot of traffic, so you just move on. But during the day, you would assume that that's a concern on their part, that their trucks take up all the road. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, and just to that effect, I'll just go ahead and read the next to last paragraph that appears on page 2 of the staff report. This is information straight from the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, where it talks about it's providing guidance for the use of warning signs. It says, guidance in section 2C.49, vehicular traffic warning signs, further states that vehicular traffic warning signs should be used only at locations where the road user's sight distance is restricted or the condition, activity, or entering traffic would be unexpected. So I would say, so in this portion of the city, since it is a heavy commercial area, it is not an unexpected condition. While we can appreciate, the interest in trying to further safety, this is not a condition that bears the use of a warning sign combined with a warning flasher. It's an obvious condition.
Okay. Do we have any further comments? Okay. We have a motion from Commissioner Hale to disapprove item 5B, seconded by Commissioner Schuline. Can I have your votes, please? Okay, item is disapproved. Okay, we go on now to item 5C, Jonathan Hunsel, PE CNU-A, Path Engineering, Design, and Urbanism, to consider requests to, 1, establish 90-degree angle parking within a proposed on-street parking area on the north side of Northwest First Terrace from approximately 695 feet east to 760 feet east of the east curb line of North Villa Avenue, and 2, establish 1 reserved parking space for the physically disabled on the north side of Northwest First Terrace from approximately 695 95 feet east to 710 feet east of the east curb line of North Villa Avenue. And 3, establish a passenger loading zone on the north side of Northwest First Terrace from approximately 600 feet east to 695 feet east of the east curb line of North Villa Avenue. Sir, if I can have your name, your address, you have up to 5 minutes, and please fill out a form when you're done.
Thank you, sir. Jonathan Heisel, 3233 East Memorial Road in Edmond, Oklahoma. And on behalf of the client, I would like to thank you for your consideration of this project, an on-street parking and a passenger drop-off area in front of this new Head Start school. It'll be little ones from 6 months to about 4 or 5 years. Some teacher parking is shown on the Northwest Terrace piece, and then the drop-off for the young kids in case it's needed. I would like to thank you for your consideration of this on-street parking and answer any questions that you have. I did want to point out one thing, if I could. Plan OKC looks at drainage and reducing our impervious areas, and I think there's an opportunity. Item 5A just approved a parking depth of parallel parking, similar situation. They've got over 1,100 feet of vehicles, and this has 550 vehicles per day. So our low volumes, our drainage, and reducing our impervious area, I would like to tweak that a little bit and have 22-foot parking instead of 25, give us a little more green space in front. But other than that, I appreciate your consideration of this item.
So you're asking us to only approve a 22-foot, not 25? Is that what you just asked?
I was hoping to reduce that distance a little bit to give more green space and an area in front of the building. They're on the south side of the buildings and the sidewalk.
Because right now,
It's at 25.
so let me ask the counselor, can we change down to that?
The applicant can amend his application before you.
So any recommendation, any motion on this item would have to mention changing it from a 25-foot to a 22-foot?
Yes.
And we're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. And that's what you would like?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So on your staff input, if you could say what the impacts, positive or negative, would be on that for us. Okay. Anything else, sir?
That's it.
Anybody else wanted to talk on item 5C? Okay. Staff input, please.
All right, you've got our comments before you. This item is a little bit different from item A, which you had heard previously for the angle parking, or 90-degree parking that was on Northwest 27th Street. The reason for the greater depth on these spaces because, unlike 27th Street, Northwest First Terrace has got a curve as you proceed around. The 85th percentile speed runs a little bit higher on Northwest First Terrace. So the reason for providing that additional depth is it gives a little bit more hazard recognition time if you're backing out, especially if you can't be seen as for vehicles approaching around the curve. And really, it's just basically an additional safety measure. It's just for the people that use this facility and also the ones that travel Northwest First Street or Northwest First Terrace. And another reason for doing that is it is consistent with the 90-degree angle parking, which is on the back side of Mark Twain Elementary School, which is just on the opposite side of the block from this one. So, like I said, the additional depth really is for safety in this particular case, since the road is not straight, and we just want drivers to have that little bit of extra time for reaction in the event that something comes around the curve that they didn't see when they initially started backing out. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So your staff input is
25.
stick with the 25 because of
That's our
that safety
recommendation, right.
concern. Because of that safety concern.
Exactly.
Sir? Any reply back on
Well,
that?
the curve is on the other direction, so people backing out would be coming from the east side, and so there shouldn't be anyone backing into the opposing lane. Would be my comment on that. I'd also say that there's the residential driveways. You can see 4 on the aerial right there. That would be more of a concern for the curve. Be my concern.
But would you be okay with the 25 if we went that way?
If
Because
it
you're
is-
talking about
if it is
drainage concerns.
commissioners' purview to stick with the 25. We don't want to hold it up, but we would prefer to go with the 22.
22, okay. All right. And so nobody else needs to speak on item 5C. We have our staff input. Okay, do we have a motion concerning item 5C?
Can I have a question of staff before I make a motion? In your description, you also say that we talk about maneuvering depth behind vehicles being to a total of 20 feet, which is sufficient for the backing needs of all vehicle types tested. So I'm hearing in that description that the 5 feet is actually additional, is over and above.
That's correct. And I think to help you understand where we're coming from, the view that we've got pulled up on the overhead and in front of you shows two views of looking down Northwest First Terrace. One is looking west across the parking areas, the other one is looking east. So the east-looking view shows the curvature of the roadway and shows where the parking will be situated on the north side. And all we're trying to do is make sure that we're just trying to provide drivers with as good a view of approaching traffic as we possibly can, because these particular spaces are 90-degree head-in spaces as opposed to 45s. So that, the chances of someone pulling in from any direction is, and these are more universal in that regard. I mean, you can enter them from, doesn't matter which direction you're headed, whereas an angled parking space, more like a 45, really only lends itself to being turned into from one single direction. So we're just trying to make it as safe as possible. That's all.
And I respect that too, but his point is also taking that the curve comes from the other direction. So he's saying that coming from the east, there is no curve, where we're talking about this parking, right? Am I misunderstanding? And looking at the curve comes from the west, not from the east, where the...
Okay, if you look at the illustration before you now, you can see that the curve is actually to the west of the proposed site.
Right.
Right. So it'll be eastbound drivers whose view of drivers who are backing out of these spaces will be partially obscured for drivers who are approaching
From the west.
who are eastbound on Northwest First Terrace.
Although they're not backing into that lane, they're backing... Well, I guess if they were going the other way, I guess they could, conceivably.
Yeah, conceivably, yes.
Okay. Well, I'll move to, we accept or adopt the motion. I'm sorry, I will move to approve the application subject to staff's recommendation that we maintain the backing distance at 25 feet.
I have another comment. So if we've got an 18-foot parking space, we've got 25 feet of, that's, what, we've got 7 feet of area there. Is that going to encourage double parking? Are people going to, I mean, it's wide enough for a car to pull in and kind of parallel park behind parked vehicles if there isn't.
In this particular case, I wouldn't think so, because the applicant is also providing an off-site parking lot as well. I think these are supplemental spaces. Are they not?
Those are the primary spaces. The other spaces in the green are the passenger drop-off areas. So those aren't parallel parking spaces. And I believe the existing street section is close to 30 feet wide. It's a wide section.
Yeah, it's noted in the staff report. It's a 26-foot wide road. It appears on page 1.
Okay, so we have a motion. Are you sticking with that motion? So we have a motion from Commissioner Schuline to approve item 5C as written. Okay? As written with staff recommendation, which is the 25-foot with staff. Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Schuline to approve item 5C as written to include the staff recommendation. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Hale. Okay? Do we have any talk on the item? Well, I guess my question is, a normal 90-degree is supposed to be how big? What's the minimum that we can have, if anybody wanted to have one, that we would say, you got to at least have this? that the 18 feet?
Yes, now, but at this point in time, we've got to recognize the fact that our standards for 90-degree parking only come from the standards that the city uses for parking lots,
Okay.
not against active travel lanes. As a matter of fact, we're in the process of putting together an item for on-street parking standards.
And what do you think that might?
That will depend. It will depend on the width of the adjacent travel lanes
Right.
and a few other variables.
So this 26-foot road, is that a big road or a small road or a medium road?
That would be considered ordinary and
Ordinary.
and standard for a residential type section.
Ordinary. Okay, so if we were a year in advance here and we had a parking space ordinance size, what would that be a recommendation of? 25 feet?
Well, let's go. What we're working on is we're working on a table that's going to provide you with general guidance. It's going to indicate minimum depth of a space and then the amount of maneuvering room that you're going to need to get in and out, because obviously you need more space to pull into you need more maneuvering space to get in and out of a 90-degree angle space than you do a 45. And so we're going to standardize a table that tells you basically how much maneuvering space you have to have. And that can include like half the lane width or half the roadway width if it's just a 2-lane road, or just whatever the width of the adjacent lane is. Because the one thing that we want to work towards doing is not having that when you back out of an angled parking space that you have to encroach across the center line of the road. And like I said, in a case like this where you've got a curvature in the road, where sight distance may be partially obstructed, we're just trying to find a blend that applicants, when they make their application for angled parking, they'll have a table that they can look at, and then they'll be able to determine what the depth of those spaces are going to be. They'll be able to calculate them themselves and then submit that at the time they make their application. It won't be one of these things where we have to continuously present every case in a different format.
Understand. So the big question is, when you're backing out of a space, 18, 20, 22, 25-foot space, you first of all would not want to go over that white line. Is that as you're backing out, your front of your tires, when you start to turn, you wouldn't want to cross that white line. That's why we determine a 22 or 25 is the length of that white line, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Over the length of the parking space?
Length of the parking space. So I'm backing out of a parking space, okay? Meaning I have to, at some point, turn my wheels to cut my vehicle so the rear of my vehicle doesn't pass the center line. Okay. So I'm now saying, as I'm backing out, the intent of a 22-foot white line parking space compared to a 25 is, you would expect me to pull out further, then turn my wheels and cut across, because the goal is to not cut across that parking.
That's correct.
If you all see what I'm saying. So how long is a vehicle?
It depends on what you're driving.
But a normal four-door Ford F-150 kind of thing.
Well, a Ford F-150 is 19 feet 8 inches.
So 20 feet, okay? So you got a 20-foot vehicle pulling out of a parking space. So it needs to at least be 20-foot parking spaces. Because that's the normal size of the trucks that we have now.
Right, that's correct. And right now, based on our angle parking standards for 90-degree spaces, the minimum depth for a parking space is 18 feet.
Okay, right.
So if you had a large vehicle like that, and say that you didn't have the ability to have your bumper overhanging at the front, say that you were up against a wall or some other object like that, you would actually be 2 feet beyond the end of the parking space to begin with.
Correct. Right, because we all know that especially a larger vehicle like that would pull up and curb check with their tires and put their front bumper over. Right. So, and so you're saying that chart right now says a 90-degree parking should be 18 feet?
That's the city's minimum standard for a stall inside a parking lot.
Stall.
Yeah, we don't have any on-street standards, which is what
Right.
we're working towards developing.
Okay. And 25-foot would leave 5 feet behind one of the biggest trucks. And you pull in with a nice little 4-door Honda, you'll have 6 or 8 feet.
Right, but it also depends on what vehicles that you're pulling out from in between.
that's a
If
good
there are
point.
two panel
So-
vans or something to either side of you, you've got to back out a fair distance before you've got the ability to look up and down the road. And that's part of what this additional maneuvering space gives you. It gives you that ability to start looking before your vehicle's actually physically in the lane.
Yeah, because you could have 2 big F-150s there and have to be able to pull out far enough before you can even start to
Right.
turn. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we have a shorter distance and I'm backing out and I'm into the eastbound lane, coming out, and the person coming around the curve is coming around the curve, and then someone currently going east swings out to avoid me, clear as mud, right? No, I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
You got traffic going to the east, I'm backing out, they start to go around trying to avoid me because I'm hanging out into the lane, and you've got someone coming around the curve with their sight distance obstructed, and you have the potential for a collision because they can't see. I, for one, am in favor of a 25-foot to have more space. And if I need to reword that, I'm sure that came out kind of jumbled, but you see what I'm saying? Because they are coming in off of that curve if you're going to the west.
Correct.
And sir, what's the comment about drainage you were talking about, that you're concerned, you wanted the extra 3 feet?
You can add sod to the front end then, or you can add some space in the front end to not have more impervious area. So one of the things Plan OKC is trying to do is reduce our impervious areas around the city, less drainage runoff going to our inlets and our oversight, our trunk lines that are already under capacity. So this is a way to, item A was 22 feet on a busier street that had more accidents, and so I just thought that this would be a good opportunity to go to use the same distance for a lower volume street with fewer accidents.
Okay. Any other talk on item 5C? Okay. Yes, sir.
Just personal opinion, I think if we don't have a standard for on-street parking, but I think we ought to take a look at the next closest applicable standard, which is in my opinion, it's the parking lot, which is the 22 feet.
Which is the 18 feet.
It's 18 feet.
Okay. Motion and second stands? Okay. All right, so we have a motion from Commissioner Schuline to approve item 5C as written to include staff recommendations, seconded by Commissioner Hale. Can I have your votes, please? Okay, item is approved. We go on now to item 5D, Katie Risen Lantrip, to consider a request for the installation of a traffic signal at the intersection of Quail Creek Road and Northwest 122nd Street. Do you have anybody here to speak on item 5D? Can we have staff input, please?
All right, we've got our comments before you. When we reviewed this intersection with respect to the signal warrants and the manual and uniform traffic control devices, this particular location didn't satisfy any of the warrants for consideration. One thing that we did notice when we went out and conducted our traffic studies is we got an 85th percentile speed of 45 miles an hour. 122nd Street at Quail Creek Road is posted at 40. So one thing that we did do, although it's not required, is the manual allows you to look at basically reduced condition traffic warrants for higher speed roads, or if it actually technically applies when your speed limit is posted higher than 40. In this particular case, it's not applicable, but since the 85th percentile was at 45, we went ahead and ran it using the lower threshold numbers for consideration of a traffic signal, and this particular location did not pass, even at the reduced thresholds. The biggest thing that is, if something was approved here, there are some teardrop-shaped islands in Quail Creek Road, and they would need some serious modification. in order to be able to accommodate turning maneuvers. And we've got some graphics that are within the staff report for your consideration. But at this point in time, since the location doesn't meet any warrants for signalization, doesn't have a collision history, it's not a school crossing, we just didn't have justification to be able to recommend it for approval. So, happy to answer any other questions that you might have relative to this item.
Okay, do we have a motion concerning item 5D?
Motion to deny.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hale to disapprove item 5D. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second by Commissioner White. Do we have discussion on this item? Okay, we have a motion to disapprove item 5D from Commissioner Hale, seconded by Commissioner White. Can I have your votes, please? Okay, item is disapproved. Okay, do we have any comments from citizens? Item 6. Okay, item 7, reports from traffic commissioners, et cetera. We'll wait on the traffic comment stuff till we get around to staff. So if anybody has anything, we'll start with Commissioner Clare.
Nothing to report.
And to Commissioner White.
Nothing?
And Commissioner Hale.
Nothing to add, sir.
Commissioner Sheeline.
No, sir, thank you.
All right. Counselor, do you have anything? Captain, do you have anything? I'd like to welcome our new captain. He's the captain of the Bricktown area. That's always the person that we have on the seat here is the captain from Bricktown. He's brand new there. So if you have any problems in Bricktown, you go. I'm your man. Okay, so besides the staff report on all the stuff that he tells us about and traffic comment, does anybody else have anything? All right, staff.
All right, you've got the latest and greatest draft of our, what we're now calling an alternative speed abatement program. And the reason why it's being labeled that way is because it now, the way it's been crafted is it allows citizens to work with staff, once we've got an approved program, to be able to undertake some measures that might help them place devices either in the street or alongside the street to reduce the occurrence of speeding in the areas where they are. So it's out there. We'd appreciate any feedback that you might give us on it, because I imagine we'll have another subcommittee meeting yet to go over it. The next step of development is going to be just waiting to get some feedback from the membership of the commission regarding how the program's laid out, and then we'll be working on kind of detailed descriptions for for features that people can apply to use, whether it's like a permanently mounted driver speed feedback sign or things like speed humps or speed cushions, that sort of thing. And so in that regard, the program offerings will always should be fairly flexible, and they can be added to or taken away from depending on what our experiences are.
Right, so we get a shell of a program, and then you start bringing things into it that people can use.
That is our next
And then
goal.
5 years from now, some technology comes up that makes it even better. We just add into the program.
That's right.
Okay, and so the basic summary thing was, it's a program, city approved, that can modify the road. You guys approve it to modify the road, whether a hump or something.
Or mini roundabout or whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
something.
Exactly.
Changes the road as it currently is. That neighborhood or whoever wants to pay for it, pays for it. Do they get with a contractor to put it in? They do everything, and then you guys just go out there and go, yep, that's what we said is okay.
Right, because at this point in time, the city doesn't have any financial participation in the things that get built or installed.
So I'm sure that out in the economic world, companies would, in the local area, once they see that there's going to be a need, would be available. And so a neighborhood would say, okay, yes, we want a speed hump of some sort, whether it be a rubber hump or cement or whatever, or a turnabout or something to narrow the road or whatever. And then you guys would approve it for that location. It wouldn't be
That's
approved
correct.
for anywhere else, just that location gets that modification. And then at some point there'd be some plans put in front of you to show how it all,
Right, 'cause
exactly where it would work.
At the time, the application form that's in this packet right now is just to basically bring it to our attention so that we can start talking with an applicant and start exploring what they might consider or might be looking at.
Right, and so then they come back and they say, yes, this is what we kind of want, what we're thinking, and you would say, yep, that's kind of right, then you would sign off on something to say, yes, you can do that.
That's correct. And
The
see,
staff would
they'll
do
have neighborhood participation because they'll
Right.
still need to petition because, it's not going to be something that just like an individual can
No.
spring on a neighborhood.
Right.
It wouldn't.
Right, and so it comes up, and the neighborhood said, that's what we want on that road, that modification to the road to try to bring down the speed.
Right.
And you would approve it, whatever it is. They'd have drawings, and they'd have some
Yeah, because
sort of work.
we'll have to work with them on planning the
Right.
planning the changes.
And then once that's all approved, and they have funding, and they have their contractor, off it goes. It gets put up. Would there be like, you guys going out to make sure it's the right, or they just say it's right?
No, we'd go out there.
You go out there and make
We
sure
would
it's
have
right.
to.
And then I read that you were talking about maintenance of it, that once it's there, what was said about that? So 5 years from now, it's no longer as good or in shape as it should be. Is it ours in the cities, or is it still there?
Yeah, the
that they
way the
gotta fix?
program is, once it is in place, it's basically its ownership is turned over to the city. Because in the event that, say, someone uses you can get a prefabricated speed hump. And usually it's kind of a modular unit that would bolt to a road. But if it starts to deteriorate or fall apart, I mean, you can't necessarily rely on a neighborhood association to make a timely repair to it. And so in the event that they can't, or the people that were there that were pushing for it at once upon a time are no longer there, or there's no interest in it, the city can just have it removed. But
So is it a removal thing or a replace thing?
at this point in time, it'd just be, chances are, we would try and work with them to see if they can get it repaired, and if not, it could just be removed. The city would reserve the right to remove it.
Right, if it's no longer in proper working order.
Correct. If it becomes a hazard,
It becomes a hazard. And so they would go back to the neighborhood to say, if you want to fix it, put a new one in.
correct. Right.
That's fine. But we won't go re-pour something, or we won't then go do it, we just take it away. Is
Right.
what the plan basically is thinking. Okay? I think that's all the questions I kind of have on it, sir.
I had a question, and I'm all for it. I know a lot of time has been spent on it, and I appreciate all the effort on it. Just kind of a question. We get this all approved. I'm part of a neighborhood. I'm unaware of this program. I make a request to the city for a new stop sign to reduce the traffic speed in my neighborhood. You receive that. Where does it go from there? Do you refer me to the new ASAP program, or do I still get a hearing? What happens?
Well, if it's an item that requires commission attention, it goes through the ordinary process and it comes before you. I mean, like, yield signs don't require commission action, but stop signs do. So on something like this, we are not where you are affecting a change, but you're not affecting a regulatory change, because the speed limit's not being altered, traffic control is not really being altered, then this would be something that would be administered at the staff level.
Okay, so I make application, you recognize this as a speed, in a neighborhood speeding problem. Would you contact me then and just say, we do have this program that you want to look at first, or do you want to go to?
We would give everyone all their options right up front.
Okay.
And they may say, well, we don't have any interest in that, or that's something we couldn't afford anyway, so I think we're going to go ahead and make an application for like stop control at an intersection.
Okay, so myself and all my neighbors were broke, so we decided to go ahead and proceed with the sign. Is that?
It's always an option, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Or if it doesn't meet the criteria of amount of vehicles, was it 500 vehicles a day, or?
Yeah, the numbers are substantially reduced from what we had presented earlier. A lot of the information that you had seen previously had come from the city of Omaha. And their programs, I don't know, I think it dates back to about 2000 or so. A lot of the information now that you're seeing, we picked up off from the city of Austin, Texas. And it's more current, and they've got lower thresholds for someone to be able to demonstrate that they've got there's an issue on their street. Because we'll still go ahead and conduct preliminary studies, because sometimes if there truly isn't and we can't identify or we can't verify what's being presented, we would just say, we can study it again, maybe at a later date, but at this point in time, you're not really a candidate for a program like this, because the problem that you've identified and have told us exists, we cannot we can't document because, try as we might, study as we might, we can't ever get the numbers to match what may be reported to us as being the case.
Sir?
So, am I understanding correctly that this program would not be available to new developments? The way it's defined in here, it looks as if it's not.
Well, we've already talked with the planning people, and we've asked them to incorporate common things of winding the road,
Sure.
medium stuff, making the lanes in the development phase,
Right?
so we don't have to go back and fix it.
Right, and this right here.
Right, but I mean, like, say, speed humps, I know from personal experience that, even if a developer would want to put in a speed hump today, they cannot. But after this is in place, would a developer be able to do so, if they were in front of a planning commission, it was a long cul-de-sac, type situation, those are things that are real, that I know from personal experience that exist. So, certainly would allow, developers to find common ground with planning commissioners and, residents and those type of things.
Yeah, the way this program has been developed so far, it's more of a retrofit for existing neighborhoods. That's why we've included things where we'll go out there and conduct traffic volume studies and speed studies. As far as, a planned neighborhood goes, there's no way to get that information. I mean, you might be able to predict the number of trips or number of vehicles on a road, but as far as how the drivers are going to behave, there's not really a means to do that.
I would defer over to Mr. Schuline here. In your charter for the last 2-3 years, what's been your goal with this program?
Well, I think we wanted it to be available to new development as well, or maybe some of the principles incorporated in new development, but I don't know how we could retrofit or.
Some of the things, like you were to pursue like the installation of prefabricated speed humps along the street. You typically during the early phases of development, you get an awful lot of heavy construction. Trucks coming through, concrete trucks, brick delivery vehicles and things along that line, and they would probably have a tendency, especially if it was like a prefabricated speed hump, they would probably do a significant amount of damage to things early on in their life. So chances are, this would a measure like this would probably be something that would be done after construction is substantially completed.
Right. I think we had a two-pronged approach going in. The first one, the easier one, is to work with the planning department, and this happened like after your first subcommittee meeting, you got a hold of the planning people and said, hey guys, and you've also worked with planning, to say, hey, when you look at plots, ensure to think about this. Find ways to slow people down on the major entry points, or if you have a 2,000 foot run on the backside, do something to slow it down on the backside. Build something in there to slow it down. So that was done 3-4 years ago, to ask them to do that. And I think that they took that seriously, and they are working on that. Then we said, what are we going to do for current systems?
The toolbox is pretty limited, though.
Correct.
I mean, the toolbox today is you put a curb in your street, and maybe you put a curb in the center. That's the only two things you can do.
Narrowing the road with no parking, but just narrow the road so you see the curb line, or a median thing, or trees,
today.
Something, that's right. Something to visually slow it down.
Right.
And so we deferred that mainly to the planning people, because that's really not our concern, because, when they look at the plats, they have to look at that. They have to look at all the vehicles coming out, how they're going to access major arteries. They worry about that. Our problem was twofold on existing neighborhoods. The first one is neighborhoods were built pretty square. They were all square, and especially on a backside or something of that nature, a nice straight road, and it was all local traffic. So like in this case, this wouldn't fix that problem. Because if you're on the backside of a neighborhood and you got people doing 35, 40 miles an hour, and they're all neighborhood people, our answer to them was, hey, send a letter from the homeowners association or get with your neighborhood people and say, please stop. That was our solution. Because you're not going to get 500 cars a day on the backside of a neighborhood. So we understood that's a neighborhood problem. But I think our number one problem that we found out would exist in neighborhoods was when other neighborhoods were added on past it. And now you had that through traffic. You had these nice long straight roads in old neighborhoods, and then they moved on to other neighborhoods, 2 or 3 neighborhoods, and people now are accessing it, and they're going 35, 40 in a 25 in a residential area. How do we slow them down? And I think that became the focus of this. And I think that's what this is saying. If a road's got 1,000 to 2,000 vehicles in a neighborhood, that's a problem. That's not a neighborhood road anymore. You know, and they're speeding. So you're 3 miles over, I think is what you came up with on your thing. If they were going over 28 or something like that.
That's
But if
correct.
they're going over 3 miles over and you got a lot of vehicles, you're assuming then they're not your vehicles from that neighborhood. They're a through traffic problem. This is 70-80% of the problem right here, is those are the ones that come up in front of us, and the only thing we can do is make a stop sign every 300 feet. That's the only thing we could have done in the last years that we've been here. This gives them an option, and so...
I still say it does nothing for development, because the real situations that you described are in the minds of planning commissioners that maybe experience that in their own neighborhood today, or city council members that experience that. And so when they see a development that even comes anywhere near close to the potential of a problem, they say no, because there's no tools in the toolbox for a developer to be able to plan for that calming off the start. So it just ends up getting an automatic no. So I feel strongly that they should have the tools in the toolbox to be able to, fight the automatic no. It should have the same tools available that retrofit would have,
Yeah. I'll draw your attention to what we've got up on the screen. The reason this thing is also available to commercial interests as well. What you're seeing right here is the cul-de-sac end of a street called Cooley Drive. This is in the southwest portion of the city. Would you back out the aerial view just a little bit? This is just a cul-de-sac road. It runs through an industrial area. It's about 1/3 of a mile long, but it is a totally straight and level roadway. Now, if we zoom in and take a look at the north end up by the cul-de-sac, you'll see that there are 2 pairs of black tire marks. This particular road is used for racing purposes, quite literally. So a program whereby you install something like, be able to put in like a speed hump or something like that, could probably be of a significant benefit to somebody who operates a business in this area. This is obviously not something that occurs during ordinary business hours. However, and this is not a high volume road, it's just a 1/3 of a mile long cul-de-sac, but it's the only problem that it has is that it is straight as an arrow and it's exceptionally level. And outside of ordinary business hours, it's a convenient nuisance. So, there are things from a traffic, from like a speed controls perspective that you can't catch necessarily at the stages when it goes to planning. Because if this road had a fair amount of change in its elevation, it probably wouldn't be used for this purpose. But in this particular case, it is.
But I don't think there'd be anything wrong with a area going up, 250 homes, pretty big area. They have a major access area in, and they tree off of it. And in coming to the city, they say, hey, we know that's a straight road, and we know there'll be a lot of truck traffic at first. But once all the truck traffic's done, and we kind of give the neighborhood back to the neighborhood, when the building, that we're going to put in as part of our thing, put in some speed humps on that straight road. And the planning commission could take that as they think about traffic, could think about that. Because you would know a 250 house neighborhood would have on a major road 500 vehicles. Would that be something that could happen using this?
It's possible.
I
but
think
it's not
that's
just-
what.
Yeah, it's possible, but it's almost better to either try to design to mitigate creating a situation, like this thing on Cooley Drive, where you basically build in something that's designed for speed, even though it was never intended for that purpose.
Right.
But, not all neighborhoods may want something like this. So it's really, it's a good retrofit for something after the fact as far as, like future developments go. Maybe things that, like I know the planning staffs are looking at utilizing shorter block lengths where you can interrupt a block. And, you can offset intersections and that sort of thing. But yeah, because if you can do things to reduce, to prevent creating long stretches of long uninterrupted stretches of road, then you can probably go a long way towards reining in some bad behavior.
But they could use it.
I would say yes, could.
Okay, there you go. So make sure there's words in there that says if the planning department, when talking with new builders, they can use some of the things in the toolbox if it's appropriate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, is that what you're just wanting, something like that?
There's certainly, you guys know as well as I do that when when you see new developments go in there are all, there's all sorts of people that are for it, no matter what, and there's lots of people that are against it, no matter what. And really, what the Planning Commission needs to do is use the comprehensive plan and, all the things that are, available to help them decide, whether something's, fits, whether a particular development fits or doesn't fit. But certainly from experience, traffic, perceived increased traffic is something that is a big issue and can kind of be used, by opposition, even when it isn't necessarily outside, because nothing gets built that's outside of what the public works and what the city ordinances are, right? But when you have people that are overly concerned over things that might, like you say, this is a great example. This is a very, short cul-de-sac, really, but so it'd just be great to be able to have those tools available when there is an inordinate amount of concern, I would say, from citizenry. Because one thing is for sure, when there's an inordinate amount of concern from citizenry, the folks around the horseshoe typically listen, whether it's really warranted or not. So.
Okay, anybody else will have some comments? I just have a final, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to just go back and make sure I understood this correctly. So the funds would be put up by a neighborhood association for the installation of any of these devices, and then they would be transferred over to the city for maintenance?
The city, the applicants would pay for the construction of
Pay for the
whatever it is that goes in.
construction.
Yeah.
But then any maintenance is their responsibility?
Well, the way it's drafted right now, basically, once it's put down, they transfer maintenance and operation over to the city.
Okay.
So, but if something fails or isn't say like someone puts in a driver's speed feedback device and it quits operating, we're not under this program, the city would not be obligated to make repairs to it. We can either let them know that it needs to be repaired, or we can just take it down.
I think there needs to be some mechanism in place that if it's at the city's discretion that they're going to remove it, that the neighborhood needs to have, I guess, some kind of appeal process. I mean, because it was their money that put it in place to begin with, and then if the city decides that it's not effective or whatever and removes it, then
Well,
I just don't think that's fair to the neighborhood.
Right, but under this program, it's not that the city would necessarily take it out because we didn't think it was effective. It would probably be only removed if it needed to be maintained, and there was no one there to maintain it, and that we're not budgeted for its maintenance.
But I also hear that the city's supposed to be maintaining it.
Well, let me just make sure I get it clear also what you're asking. So there's a speed radar thing, and it's working for a year and a half, and all of a sudden the batteries go dead because it's a solar thing, and it's dead. Well, I think at that point, somebody would either say to the neighborhood, hey, we need to replace the batteries, or they would call the city and say, hey, this thing here is not working. What we're saying is the city wouldn't go buy batteries and put them in. But if we get told that something is no longer working, we would then go back to the neighborhood and say, hey, are you aware this isn't working? And then if they say, you know what, we don't care anymore, it can go, take it to the scrap heap, we would go tear it down and tow it away or move it away. Same thing would be like a speed hump. Let's say it's a cement one, or just go that way. It's a cement hump, the cement wears out after 3 years, right where the tires are, it's all broken, so it's no longer a hump where the tires go. It's a hump everywhere else, but not where the tires go. Well, the city wouldn't go in and re-pour that, but we could let the applicant know, or they would know, hey, it's no longer working, we need to rebuild it. And if the city says, you know what, we don't care anymore, let them go through there, it's a visual thing and we don't agree, we have the right to go in there and take it up. Is that kind of two summaries of what it could look like?
Yeah, and to answer your questions, there's on page 4 of this particular draft document, there's a section called Installation, Maintenance, and Ownership. And I'll just go ahead and read it since it's not very long. It says, once a speed abatement plan is approved and accepted by residents in the affected area, program participants may privately purchase the speed abatement features and provide them to the city for installation. The types of speed abatement features acceptable to the city under this program are described in detail in Appendix B of the document. As with all private facilities installed within the public right-of-way under an administrative revocable permit, the city is not responsible for their maintenance. Unlike a private facility installed under an administrative revocable permit, however, the speed abatement feature becomes the property of the city once installed. Because the city does not materially or financially participate in the program, if a speed abatement feature is damaged, becomes inoperative, or malfunctions, the city reserves the right to remove it. Further, the city reserves the right to remove any and all speed abatement features for cause at any time.
I just think once you run through a couple of these that were, cities or neighborhoods have put up their own money, and for whatever reason, 4 or 5 years down the road, the element's removed. I mean, what kind of precedent is that setting for them? Nobody's going to want to participate if they think they're going to put up their money, and then 3 or 4 years from now, the element, because it hasn't worked out necessarily how they thought it was, is removed, and their money's essentially wasted.
Well, and this is one reason why this is just a draft program, and we're, if there's anything that any member of the commission sees that, they think that ought to be changed or amended somehow, or, maybe there ought to be discussion for how, if there ought to be some level, minimum level of funding for repairs as needed, or something along that line.
Are you saying the city should, once the neighborhood builds it, the city then owns it, and the city should maintain it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying
which would be okay. That's fine.
We're using the language that it's conveyed to the city after the neighborhood purchased it, and it's conveyed to the city. But then they're saying that, it can be removed.
Well, I think, let me ask
Only if
the
it's
staff.
non-functional.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other question is if it's, say you put in a speed hump and you've got a water line break or something, and there's minimal, your repair budgets are minimal. If they've got to tear up that pavement where that speed hump is to replace the water line, is whether they put that back at the discretion of the city? I mean, it's like, got to be replacing what's there.
Let me ask the one question that brought up. what do we do now with signal lights? We approve things, the applicant pays for the light. They make a third lane, they put in the sensors, they put up the lights, and then they give it to us, right?
Yes, just like any other.
So when the
public-
red light no longer works, just the yellow and the green, who replaces the red light?
City does.
And that's in our budget.
That's correct.
So I think where we're saying as a possible input is that once it's up and we accept it and it meets our standards, that then it's ours.
Along with that, there's not going to be a whole lot of wear and tear to a traffic signal like you would expect with a traffic calming device. I mean, it's there, it's protected against weather, whatever. But I think that if you have the proper wording from the get-go, that as time goes on and normal wear and tear occurs, it will be to the city's at the city's discretion whether it's replaced, maintained, or whatever. But I agree that it needs to be from the get-go that, yes, we're asking your neighborhood to invest in this, but you need to be aware that as wear and tear, normal wear and tear occurs, we will have the right to remove it unless you decide to maintain it.
See, that's where we're at now. I think either those words exactly, meaning, okay, guys, you put it in, but through normal wear and tear, things start to break. If you want to continue that traffic calming feature, you need to fix it. Because if you don't, and now it's an eyesore, it's unsafe, then we're going to come in and just take it out. Because we're not going to fix it. So there's one option. And then the other option is treat it like a street light or a street signal light, where once it's ours, then we're responsible. Now, of course, this goes to my final comment is what's the and I think this kind of applies, if we're not going to spend any money of city money, who's the approval of this plan? What's the staff's thought that once you get Appendix B all set up and everybody's good with the wording, comes to us, we're like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. Does that put it into effect, or does it have to go to City Council? What's the staff's opinion on that?
I would imagine that we would run this past the City Council for the
Even though there's
approval.
no expenditure of funds,
Right.
you would still think that City Council would be the final body to say, this is a program of the city?
I would say so, yes.
Especially if we're going to recommend, that's where it goes to Part B, that if we're going to put in there that we recommend that we own it and fix it, now we're expending resources and we're not a resource body.
I believe if we're going to give citizens the opportunity to modify streets, the city council probably would like to be informed that we're asking people to modify public roads.
Right, so that would be the final thing, is once we kind of get a feel of what it really is going to look like, who's the approval authority? I mean, we just, yeah, that's what we like. It goes to City Council. Do they have to approve it or just know of it? Does it get put in ordinance?
You would send it as either a proposed ordinance change establishing the program, or you could send it as a resolution of this body. But because it does involve the possible expenditure of funds, either the program would have to be separately approved as part of traffic's budget that is approved by the City Council, or the program individually could be approved on your recommendation.
Yeah, it'd be up to the City Council whether they just go to the proper organization that would have to to pay for it and say how much more in your budget do you need, or to have its own funding line established. But that's a City Council problem. Okay. Sir.
Just to go on record as saying I totally agree with Commissioner Hale. I think that not only do the neighborhoods need to put up the money, the initial capital, but also the maintenance money. It just makes the most sense to me. I mean, certainly it's because it's just to make them feel better about what's the speed in their neighborhood. Basically.
And if they change their mind,
we're giving them tools other than throwing out their own stop sticks.
Right. But if they change their mind after 5 years and it's no longer working,
right,
and they don't want to do the maintenance and they don't want to do it, and they're just going to let it grow weeds,
Right.
then the city can come in and take it away.
I think that makes
So
perfect
those
sense.
kind of worded
Yeah.
is what, okay?
Yeah. Now, it's going to cost the city to do that, which is kind of bad for the city. You know, that's the only negative for the city, really, is that,
So there is a little more cost for the city
Right, yeah.
associated with this program.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else that any comment, anything for the staff concerning this? Yes, sir.
Just one real quick thing. The Parks Department already has, I think, some policies in place for things that are donated to the city, for neighborhoods that may donate picnic tables or park benches or trash receptacles. They have policies that say that I think the neighborhood has to pay maybe twice the cost or a similar, make agreement that they will be, understand that they can be removed if they're damaged beyond repair and similar things like that. So we might visit with them and see if they have something we could borrow from them, that language.
Okay, so from us 5 here, any more input for staff? Okay, staff, anything coming back from this? Any comments?
No, I appreciate all the discussion on the topic. Like I said, if you've got anything else that comes to mind, you want to send us anything else that you've seen, or would you like us to make modifications to, we'd be happy to work that into the policy. And I think some of the discussion that came up is probably very good because, you know, we can make it very clear that, you know, once this program gets, you know, once at such a point in time where it's adopted, we can let applicants know right up front that, you know, this is for purposes of making these changes. However, the city's not budgeted to do maintenance work for you. So, you know, you would need to plan on, you know, being on the hook for initial installation and maintenance if that's something that you decide that you want to see these things
All right.
retained over time.
Do you have anything else, any yield signs or anything else?
No, just our ordinary monthly report. Nothing out of the ordinary beyond that.
Okay, so last call from out there, last call on the horseshoe, counselor, police, staff. Okay, all right, we stand adjourned.